Picture this. You're the most powerful intelligence agency on Earth. You have unlimited money, the world's best assassins, and technology that sounds like science fiction. Your mission? Kill one man. One single man on an island 90 miles from your coast. You try 638 times over 50 years, and you fail. Every single time. This isn't fiction. This is the true story of Fidel Castro, the Cuban dictator who survived more assassination attempts than any human being in recorded history. And the methods the CIA used to try to kill him. They're so ridiculous, so creative, so absolutely insane that if you saw them in a movie, you'd walk out of the theater. We're talking exploding cigars, poisoned milkshakes, toxic diving suits, Mafia hitmen, femme fatales with poison pills hidden in cold cream jars, hallucinogenic drugs meant to make his beard fall out during a live speech. And that's just the beginning. But here's the question that kept CIA analysts awake at night. How does one man dodge 638 bullets, bombs, and biological weapons? Was Castro the luckiest human alive? Did he have supernatural powers? Or was American intelligence really that incompetent? By the end of this video, you'll know the answer. And trust me, it's way more interesting than you think. But first, we need to go back to where it all started, to the moment when a young revolutionary with a scraggly beard became America's public enemy #1. January 1st, 1959. Fidel Castro rolls into Havana on top of a tank, cigars in his mouth, revolutionary fervor in his eyes, and 90 miles away, the United States government is having a collective panic attack. Because Castro just overthrew a U.S.-friendly dictator, and he's making speeches about socialism, about taking back Cuba from American corporations, about revolution spreading across Latin America like wildfire. President Eisenhower is not amused. The CIA is definitely not amused. And when Castro starts nationalizing American-owned property, seizing sugar plantations, oil refineries, and casinos worth billions of dollars, well, that's when someone in Washington asks the question that would define the next 5 decades. Can't we just kill this guy? The answer, apparently, was, we can certainly try. The CIA had just helped overthrow governments in Iran and Guatemala. They were riding high on Cold War confidence. Taking out one bearded revolutionary on a tiny island should be easy. Should take a few months, tops. Spoiler alert, it wasn't easy, and it definitely didn't take a few months. What followed was the most elaborate, most expensive, most ridiculous assassination campaign in human history. A campaign so absurd that when the details were finally declassified in the 1970s, people thought it was a joke. But it wasn't. Every word of what you're about to hear actually happened. The CIA's first attempt was straightforward. Simple. Classic spy stuff. They'd poison him. Castro loved milkshakes. He'd stop at the Havana Libre Hotel for chocolate milkshakes almost every day. So the CIA contacted a guy in the hotel, offered him money, and gave him poison pills to slip into Castro's drink. The guy agreed. He got the pills. He waited for Castro to show up. And then, in a moment of panic, he put the pills in a freezer to hide them. When he finally tried to use them, they'd frozen to the freezer wall and broke apart. Mission failed before it even started. If you're already hooked and want to see just how wild this gets, smash that like button right now and subscribe, because what comes next makes exploding milkshakes look tame. After the milkshake fiasco, the CIA decided they needed professionals. Not CIA professionals, real professionals. The kind of professionals who actually kill people for a living. So they went to the Mafia. Yes, you read that right. The United States Central Intelligence Agency, the most powerful spy organization on the planet, recruited the mob to kill Fidel Castro. And not just any mobsters. They'd recruited the guys who'd lost the most when Castro took over Cuba. Before the revolution, Havana was the Mafia's playground. Meyer Lansky, Santo Traficant, Sam Giancana. These guys ran casinos, hotels, and nightclubs that raked in millions. Then Castro shut it all down. Kicked them out, seized their properties, made them very, very angry. The CIA figured angry mobsters with a grudge would be motivated. So they set up a meeting. CIA officers and Mafia bosses sitting in hotel rooms, planning murder like it was a business transaction, because it was. The mobsters were given poison pills, tiny things designed to dissolve in liquid, tasteless, deadly within hours. The plan was to slip them into Castro's food or drink. Simple, clean, untraceable. Santo Traficant knew a guy in Cuba. This guy had access to restaurants Castro frequented. The pills were delivered. The mobster waited for his moment. And then Castro stopped going to that restaurant. Just stopped. Changed his routine, like he knew. So they tried again. Different restaurant. Different contact. Same pills. This time the contact got cold feet. Chickened out. Kept the pills but never used them. Another failure. Then Sam Giancana had an idea. He had a girlfriend, Judith Campbell, who was also sleeping with President John F. Kennedy. Yeah, you heard that right. The same woman was dating both the President of the United States and a Mafia boss. The 1960s were wild. Giancana figured if you can't poison Castro's food, seduce him, get close, then kill him. So they found the perfect woman for the job. Marita Lawrence. Marita was young, beautiful, and had actually dated Castro before. She'd lived with him in Havana, knew his habits, his weaknesses, his schedule. The CIA approached her with a proposal. Go back to Cuba, rekindle the romance, and when the moment's right, slip poison into his drink. They gave her poison pills hidden in a jar of cold cream. She flew to Havana. She reconnected with Castro. And one night, she was alone with him in his hotel room. This was it. The moment. All she had to do was put the pills in his drink while he wasn't looking. She went to the bathroom, opened the cold cream jar, and the pills had dissolved. The humidity in Cuba had turned them into toxic goo. She stood there, staring at this useless jar, knowing she had one chance, and it was literally melting in her hands. She came back out. Castro was lying on the bed, and according to her testimony years later, he looked at her and said, "Did you come here to kill me?" She froze. He reached under his pillow, pulled out his pistol, and handed it to her. "Nobody can kill me," he said. "Nobody." She didn't pull the trigger. She couldn't. She left Cuba the next morning and never went back. When the CIA asked what happened, she told them Castro had some kind of sixth sense. Like he knew. Like he always knew. But the CIA wasn't done. Not even close. If poison didn't work, if seduction didn't work, maybe they just needed to get more creative. Way more creative. Somewhere in CIA headquarters, there was a department that existed for one purpose. Come up with ways to kill Fidel Castro. And the people in this department, they weren't thinking like spies. They were thinking like cartoon villains. Their first brainstorm session produced the exploding cigar. Castro loved cigars, smoked them constantly. So the CIA's Technical Services Division created a cigar packed with explosives. The plan was to slip it into a box of his favorite Cohibas. When he lit it, boom, Castro confetti. They made the cigar. They got it to Cuba. They even got it to someone who could place it in Castro's cigar box. And then Castro just didn't smoke it. Out of hundreds of cigars, he somehow never picked that one. It sat there for months until the explosives degraded, and it became just a regular cigar. Frustrated, the CIA tried a different approach. Castro was a scuba diver. He loved exploring the reefs off the Cuban coast. So they came up with Operation Poisoned Wetsuit. The plan was to give Castro a diving suit as a gift, something fancy and high-tech. But the suit would be contaminated with tuberculosis bacteria and dusted with fungal spores that cause chronic skin disease. He'd put on the suit, dive into the ocean, and breathe in death. They prepared the suit. They found someone to present it to Castro as a diplomatic gift. And Castro never wore it. Someone on his security team tested it first, found nothing obviously wrong, but Castro still refused to use it. Paranoia saved his life again. So the CIA pivoted, again. This time they focused on psychological warfare. If they couldn't kill Castro, maybe they could destroy his credibility. Make him look ridiculous. Make the Cuban people stop following him. Castro's beard was iconic. It was part of his revolutionary image, his brand. So the CIA developed a chemical powder that would make beards fall out. The plan was to spray it in the broadcasting studio where Castro gave his speeches. He'd sit down, start talking about revolution, and his beard would just fall off on live television. They called it Operation Beard Be Gone. Yes, really. That was the actual operational name. The powder was ready. The agent was in place. And then Castro stopped using that studio. Started recording speeches from different locations, never announcing where until the last minute. Another failure. At this point, you'd think the CIA would give up, right? Wrong. They were just getting started. And some of their next ideas were so insane, so over the top, that when they were declassified, Congress literally asked, "Were you people high when you came up with this stuff?" They tried to kill him with a ballpoint pen. Not just any pen. A pen with a tiny hypodermic needle that would inject poison with the click of a button. James Bond stuff. They got the pen to Cuba, and the person carrying it got arrested for something completely unrelated before ever getting close to Castro. They put poison on his shoes. Castro sent a pair of expensive Italian shoes to be shined at a hotel in New York during a UN visit. The CIA intercepted them, coated the inside with thallium salts, a poison absorbed through skin. The idea was his feet would absorb it. He'd die slowly. It'd look natural. But Castro never wore those shoes. Wore a different pair. Because of course he did. And here's my favorite. The CIA contacted a famous American illusionist, a magician, to develop exploding seashells. The plan was to paint seashells in colors Castro liked, make them look rare and beautiful, plant them on his favorite diving beach, and when he picked one up to examine it, detonation. The magician told them it was insane. He refused. The CIA tried to build the shells themselves. They made prototypes. But they could never figure out how to get them to Cuba, plant them on the exact beach, and guarantee Castro would find them. The operation was abandoned. If you're wondering how this gets even crazier, hit that subscribe button, because we're only halfway through this madness. Here's what makes this story truly bizarre. Castro knew. He always knew. And he used it. Fabian Escalante was the head of Cuban intelligence for decades. After Castro died, he gave interviews where he revealed something shocking. Cuban intelligence had infiltrated the CIA's Cuban operations from the beginning. They had moles, double agents, people feeding information directly to Havana. Every time the CIA planned an assassination, Castro knew about it days, sometimes weeks, in advance. And instead of just hiding or increasing security, he played with them. He'd change his routine at the last second. He'd switch vehicles. He'd send decoys to places he was supposed to be. He turned avoiding assassination into performance art. In 1971, Castro gave a speech where he openly mocked the CIA. He told the Cuban people about the poison cigars, the toxic diving suits, the Mafia hitmen. He held up a cigar and said, "If surviving assassination attempts were an Olympic sport, I would win the gold medal." The crowd laughed. The CIA did not. But Castro's knowledge wasn't just about intelligence. It was about understanding his enemy. He knew the CIA was bureaucratic, overly complicated, too many people involved in every operation. He knew they relied on Cuban exiles who talked too much, recruited too carelessly, trusted too easily. And he knew the most important thing. The CIA didn't understand Cuba. They thought Cubans hated Castro, that they'd help assassinate him for money. Some did, but most didn't. Castro was popular, especially in the early years. And even people who didn't like him weren't going to help America kill him. Cuban pride wouldn't allow it. The CIA kept trying anyway. Through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. Different presidents, different CIA directors, same mission: kill Castro. They brought in technical experts, behavioral psychologists, scientists. They studied his patterns, his diet, his medical history. They discovered he loved ice cream, ate it constantly. So they planned Operation Frozen Death. Poison disguised as ice cream flavoring, delivered to the ice cream factory Castro frequented. The poison was delivered. The factory worker was ready. And then Castro stopped going to that factory. Started getting ice cream from somewhere else. They tried bacteria, biological weapons that would cause fatal diseases. They tried delivering them through his cigars, his clothes, his food. None of it worked. They tried snipers, hired the best shooters, found vantage points, waited for clear shots, and Castro either didn't show up, or showed up surrounded by so much security that a shot was impossible, or the sniper got arrested before pulling the trigger. One operation involved training dolphins. Actual dolphins. The plan was to train them to plant explosives on Castro's yacht when he went sailing. The dolphins were trained. The explosives were ready, and Castro stopped using that yacht. By the 1990s, the assassination attempts slowed down, not because the CIA gave up, but because Castro wasn't seen as a threat anymore. The Soviet Union collapsed. The Cold War ended. Cuba became irrelevant to American foreign policy. But the attempts never fully stopped. Even in the 2000s, there were reports of plots, plans, conspiracies. Nothing as elaborate as the old days, but they were there. Fabian Escalante kept count. 638 attempts. Some serious, some ridiculous, all failures. So how did he do it? How did one man survive 638 assassination attempts? The answer is simpler than you think. Paranoia, intelligence, and luck. Castro was paranoid, obsessively so. He never slept in the same place twice. He had body doubles, decoys who looked like him, dressed like him, appeared in public while the real Castro was somewhere else. His security detail was massive, loyal, and ruthless. They vetted everyone who got close to him. Triple-checked everything he ate, drank, touched. His intelligence network was extraordinary. Cuban spies had infiltrated exile groups in Miami, CIA operations, even American government offices. They fed information back to Havana constantly. Castro knew what the CIA was planning before the CIA finished planning it. And yes, he was lucky, incredibly lucky. Pills that dissolved, guns that jammed, snipers who got arrested, timing that somehow always worked in his favor. Some people called it divine protection. Castro called it American incompetence. But there's a darker answer too. Maybe the CIA didn't really want to kill him. Not all the time. Castro was useful. He was the perfect enemy. As long as he was alive, America had a villain 90 miles from Florida. Politicians could campaign on being tough on Castro. The CIA could justify budgets, operations, entire departments dedicated to Cuba. If Castro died, they'd need a new enemy. And enemies aren't always easy to find. Some historians argue the assassination attempts were theater, a show to prove America was trying, while secretly knowing they'd fail. Evidence? The plans were ridiculous. Exploding seashells, beard removal powder. These weren't serious assassination attempts. These were B-movie plots. But other historians disagree. They point to the serious attempts, the snipers, the Mafia contracts, the biological weapons. Those weren't jokes. Those could have worked. They just didn't. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Some attempts were serious, others were desperate, and a few were just CIA officers throwing ideas at a wall, hoping something would stick. Castro outlived them all. He outlived Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush Sr., Clinton, and Bush Jr. 10 American presidents spent their time in office trying to kill him or overthrow him. All of them failed. He finally died on November 25, 2016. He was 90 years old. He died of natural causes in his bed, surrounded by family. Not from poison. Not from bullets. Not from exploding cigars or toxic wetsuits or CIA schemes. He died because he got old. Because eventually, time kills everyone, even the man who couldn't be killed. When Castro died, the CIA released a statement. It was brief, professional, and diplomatic. It didn't mention the 638 assassination attempts. Didn't mention the exploding cigars or the Mafia hitmen or the decades of failures. But everyone knew. The whole world knew. And the story of Castro's survival became a legend, a symbol of American overreach, of intelligence agencies playing God and failing spectacularly. The declassified documents are public now. You can read them. Operation Mongoose, Operation Northwoods, cigars/rifle. Hundreds of pages detailing plots, plans, and disasters. They're darkly funny, genuinely absurd, and deeply troubling. Because here's the thing. While the CIA was obsessing over killing one man, they missed everything else. They missed the rise of other threats. They wasted resources, money, and attention on a personal vendetta disguised as national security. And Castro? He used their obsession against them. Every failed assassination attempt was propaganda. Proof that Cuba could stand up to America. Proof that the revolution was righteous, that God or history or fate was on his side. The attempts made him stronger, more popular, more untouchable. The CIA's greatest enemy wasn't Castro. It was their own incompetence. So what's the lesson here? Maybe it's that assassination is harder than it looks. Maybe it's that obsession makes you stupid. Or maybe it's simpler. You can't kill an idea. And Castro wasn't just a man. He was an idea. Revolution, resistance, defiance. You can poison the man, but you can't poison the idea. Today, Cuba is changing. Slowly. Raul Castro stepped down. A new generation is taking over. American tourists visit Havana. Relations are thawing. The Cold War is ancient history. But the story of the 638 attempts remains. A reminder of a time when America and Cuba were locked in a deadly dance, when spy agencies played God, and when one bearded revolutionary proved that sometimes the best way to defeat your enemy is to simply refuse to die. If this story blew your mind, if you're sitting there thinking this can't be real, do me a favor. Share this video. Let people know about the wildest assassination campaign in history. Because this story deserves to be remembered, not as a tragedy, but as a comedy of errors, a lesson in hubris, and proof that sometimes the universe has a sense of humor. Fidel Castro survived 638 assassination attempts. And in the end, he died laughing.